Welcome, everybody. My name is Paul Smyers. I'm a practicing real estate agent in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. And I specialize in rural property. And today I'm going to talk about what makes a low maintenance home and property. The mortgage that we pay, the cash that we may pay for a property is one part of the equation here. Once you own a property, you sign on a deed, you own it. Now you're responsible for the whole thing. So look around your property and say, well, are there trees on my property? Is there water I got to deal with? What's going on in my property? I got to learn my property. And what is a low maintenance property in the first place? What do you look for when you try to find a property that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to hold on to? And let's start from the bottom here, a basement. The basement is not a common thing in many parts of the world. We have in America a lot of basements. A lot of the reasons they had basements because they would put the utilities down there, maybe the furnace, which was really a big thing. You didn't want that down the main part of the floor of the house. So you put down the basement. You put your laundry down there. Maybe you put down all the noisy things like your dehumidifier and your water heater down there, and you got a basement. Now, the thing about the basement is they can be a lot of problems. In rural Virginia, for example, we have a lot of groundwater, and in my area where I'm living right now, the groundwater is only about 6 feet down sometimes, and my basement goes down 8 feet. So that means that the lower part of my basement wall is down below the ground, the normal ground table of water. Now, in many places, you're damn lucky if you have water only 6 feet down. But here in Virginia, there's a lot of water. It runs off the hillsides and underground. There's a lot of old gravel and so on. So you have a basement problem in many areas, even in really nice homes. I've seen 100-year homes. They have a beautiful basement in terms of the structure originally, but it has materials on the side. There's several kinds of materials that you find on a basement wall. One is in the old school, you had just basically rocks and dirt or rocks and cement or something, and they put them together, and that was your basement wall. And roots would go through there, water can seep through there, and so on. Now, they later got on to what they call a cinder block wall. A cinder block wall is very, very common, and the walls on a cinder block, they are nice when you put them in, but the cinder block material is somewhat porous and is very subject to freezing and thawing. So you can have a basement wall with cinder block wall that freezes and thaws, and eventually a crack will break in, and the groundwater will just start seeping right into the basement. So many of the times, the basements, they have a sump pump in there, and the sump pump will gather any water that happens to be coming down in and has a float valve in there, and it will all automatically expel that water. Now, if you have a power outage and the water's coming in, and you got no pump, then you got a problem. So that's actually very, very common in many parts of North America, in America. So what you look for in a low maintenance wall in a basement, look around. If you see a concrete wall, a real solid concrete wall, not a cinder block wall, not a rock and mortar wall, a real solid concrete wall, you're going to be in pretty good shape as far as water leakage. Now, another thing you can get in a basement is mold. If you put like sheetrock on top of a concrete wall, there's a moisture area, and a lot of times you'll find that you put 2x4s on top of a concrete wall, and then you have the sheetrock on top. You have a nice room down in the basement or something, but behind that sheetrock there's mold developing and all kinds of other problems and so on that you might not even see because the sheetrock's there. So getting back to the cost, a basement wall, think about what you're going to do down the basement if you have a basement. And is it finished or not finished? And if you're going to try to finish it, you got to make sure that there's some kind of drainage, moisture repellent, or some kind of way to prevent mold and so on. So a lot of problems and financial problems that happen in homes are starting right in the basement of the foundation, and that's another thing I want to get into, foundation. There's a lot of older homes that have foundations that are really not up to par in modern standards. And yet they may be a beautiful home, especially in Virginia, the East Coast. You find a lot of the older homes from the colonial days, and they may be fantastic homes, but the foundations may be just like not up to modern standards. So what happens is, especially if it's a large house, 2 stories or whatever, it will tend to slowly sag, and sometimes you'll find that you have a really serious sag in one area of the house, and it starts to affect the beams that support the rafters and so on, and the floor joists and so on. So you got a problem. So when you look for a house, look carefully at the basement. Now, I have a client that has a basement that is 100-year-old house. Man, that house will stand. It's amazing how long it's stood. But the basement is the old style basement, and she's had some issues over the years with the sump pump and so on. And half the basement isn't even dug out, and the joists in the basement don't look really that great. But next thing you know, and even in spite of that, you have a really beautiful, saleable house in a valuable area that basically is a really sound house. But don't forget to check the basement of any property that you might buy. And if you find a property that's actually on a nice thick slab, make sure it's a nice and thick slab so it doesn't have any sagging and so on and shifting of the freezing and thawing. And then if you have a fairly good idea about how strong the foundation is, then go for it. But sorry to spend much time on foundations, but that's really important. So floors, again, floors, you can find some really old floors. In the old days when they built floors, sometimes you see a kitchen floor or even a whole floor in the entire house, and it's like really thick hardwood. Like they made kitchen floors out of 1-inch thick or 3/4 inch thick solid wide-board oak. I mean, those kind of floors will last a long, long time. If you see that floor in your house and you've got oak it's been looking good for 100 years, thumbs up on that. But flooring, there is various kinds of issues that happen in flooring with sagging of houses and foundational issues and things under the joists and the rafters, and the joists. You can find that a floor, especially in a large square footage area, it can slowly start getting some sagging and so on, especially if the joists underneath the floor. So look around on your floor. It doesn't mean that if you have a 100-year-old floor and it has a few minor problems, you have to think about, okay, I can deal with whatever that problem is, but just understand that the floor can be a really big issue, and everybody walks on the floors, and the material that's on the floor makes a big difference because you can find this cheap laminate material that, they slap it down there with a little bit of glue and everything, and it all looks nice for a couple of years. You see, so if you find a house that has really, really solid, level floors, thumbs up on that. It's going to be a low cost, low maintenance. Now and then on an old wood floor, you might want to polish it or sand them down or put some new coating on it, maybe even polyurethane if you have like if you have dogs and cats and a lot of traffic in a certain area, you definitely want to have a little bit of extra coating on your floors to make sure they survive. The electrical system. Now, a lot of people, they like these old homes, but if you find an old home that it's a beautiful home, but the electrical system has also been updated, that's a real bonus because you can find a lot of problems in old electrical systems. It might not be up to capacity, you might have a fire hazard, you might have ungrounded wiring. If you find a home that has a solid electrical panel, it's just a low maintenance item. If you have circuit breakers and not the old style fuses, if you have more than enough amperage for your house, and all the outlets are grounded, and wherever appropriate, they have what they call the grounded fault interrupter. In other words, in case there's a short of some kind, it automatically short circuits and cuts off the circuit. So look for a good electrical system. If it's really installed, if you find a house in which they've done some renovation and there's a new electrical system in there with a better control panel and with all the right kind of circuit breakers and so on and wiring, bonus. That's going to be a low maintenance. Now, again, plumbing. Plumbing is a really expensive thing sometimes in houses. And once upon a time, they used solid copper piping, and they would put those pipes together with these incredible like solder. And boy, once you did that, I mean, it'd take an earthquake to break those things. Nowadays, in modern areas, a lot of construction uses some kind of vinyl or plastic kind of plumbing for most of the plumbing, all the faucets and so on in the house, the bathtubs and so on, and PVC for the drains from the tub and so on. So if you find good solid copper piping and plumbing in an old style house, that's a real bonus because that's going to last you a really long time. On the other hand, if you find some really cheap, stuck together, somebody flipped the house and they made some quick plumbing in there and they weren't really that efficient about it, just be careful about the plumbing, because if you have a plumbing issue sometimes, maybe you're on vacation and something freezes while you're gone and your house may flood or something. So having the right kind of plumbing in your house can be a real cost saver because you just don't have to worry about it anymore, especially the copper plumbing. If you find copper pipes, you look on the basement and you look up there, copper pipes everywhere. Oh yeah, that's gold. Okay, copper pipes. The heating and air conditioning system, that goes along with windows. In many parts of the country, whether you're in a hot part of the country or you're in the warm part of the country, or excuse me, the cold part, you need some kind of a ventilation system, heating and air conditioning system. And some of the old furnaces in the old days, especially the big old oil furnaces up in the northeast and northern parts of the country, they made a lot of noise, they used a lot of energy, and you fill up an oil tank these days. Back in the days it was 69 cents a gallon, but maybe now it's like $4 a gallon. So when you fill up a 175-gallon oil tank to heat your house and the furnace is running at only 50% efficiency, that's going to cost you a lot of money in operational costs. So if you find a furnace in a house that has been upgraded, more efficient, it has a good control system with thermostat that is variable, and you can shut it off when you go out and so on. Consider that a really benefit because it's going to cost you a lot less money if you have an upgraded heating and air conditioning system, especially if the ducts that run under your home and are insulated and have been wrapped properly and so on. Some of the older homes, they have a furnace that makes so much noise and they're really not very efficient. I lived in such a home and we ended up having a wood stove in there. It just so happened there was a wood stove, and that's another thing. If you do like wood stoves, it's not for everybody. If you're in the right environment, if you have a wood stove, you can set up just right so it can save you a lot of money because you get some firewood off your property or cheap nearby and you just burn it. There's pellets you can put in. It'll take the edge off the heating bill, especially because a lot of the furnaces these days, they have a fan, and that fan runs electricity. So you're burning electricity and you're burning oil while trying to heat your house. So again, the heating system in a house can make a big difference in how much it costs you to operate your household. A roof, get into the roofs here. A simple roof. There are some roofs on houses that are so complicated, they're so high up there, God forbid you ever need some maintenance on your roof. Some guy's got to come up there with a 3-level ladder and whatever and all the equipment to get way up there and all that insurance that you got to pay just to fix maybe a hole in your roof. And certain kinds of roofs are more prone to leakage than others. And I'll get to that. But if you have a roof on one level, 2 sides, very, very simple. If you ever have a problem with your roof and never ever need to replace it, it's so easy for the roofer to get up there and do the job and fix it and inspect it, and it'll save you a lot of money. It comes down to a one-level house sometimes, but you have a roof that's so easy and positioned right. If you have a roof with all these gutters and eaves and some of these old Victorian houses, it's a very complicated roof, and there's so many different parts of it. And if you ever have to replace the whole roof on a roof that has so many complicated angles, it's going to cost you a fortune and a lot of time as well. So the materials on a roof. I live in a house now that has a tin roof. It's the original roof. It's 80 years old. 80 years old. The old people, if you find a roof, if you find a house in the countryside that has a metal roof, and there's newer houses that are built that way that have a metal roof. The thing about a metal roof is that it doesn't have all those shingles, and the more shingles you have and all that stuff that's on the shingles, and things can break loose and all kinds of leakages can happen. When you have a tin roof, a metal roof, it's usually larger panels. They're sealed at the top. They hardly ever leak, and they don't rain down little pieces of, material from the shingles all the way into your gutters and clog up the gutters. So if you find a metal roof, that's a very low maintenance roof, and that's another thing that can save you a lot of money in the long-term ownership of your property. So let me take a look at my list here. Siding. Siding is another big thing. What is the side of your house made? There are some beautiful brick ranches houses that have been made that, man, if they're made right and they're original brick, I mean, they're lasting a long, long time, and you don't have to do almost nothing to the brick ranch, the brick siding houses. And some of them are big. There's some old school. They don't really build them like that anymore, frankly. They put like a brick veneer on it maybe or something. But if you find a real brick house that has a very, very low maintenance outside, now and then maybe you spray it down with a pressure washer or something, good to go. Aluminum, and there's vinyl siding. They can be very useful. They can be good, very good, but you got to clean them. You got to maintain them. You can punch a hole in the vinyl siding. A lot of times what they did, they have taken vinyl siding and covered up an old style house that had what they call cedar siding. They may have had a wood siding on that finally over the years, sometimes they just decayed and they decided to put vinyl siding on it. So if you buy a house with vinyl siding, it's generally low maintenance. It's not the greatest appearance. Some people don't like it and so on. Then there's the log siding. If you find big thick logs, well, they're going to last for a long time. And then there's different kinds of log sidings with the flat type of logs with the chinking inside. They have some special kind of filler they put between the logs. Those kind of homes can last like 200 years. I've seen some of these old ones here in Virginia. I mean, they're still standing, and they're just going to keep standing there. The inside of a log home is a very different thing. We'll talk about in another video, but log homes have plus and minus, but they have some uses and so on. But I think a lot of people don't really like a log home, a fully log home, but they do have a very strong siding that lasts a long time. The yard, your trees. When you look around at a property, is your yard going to be high maintenance, low maintenance? If you have a big tree in your property that branches are hanging over your structures, you got a problem here, because sooner or later that big huge beam or big huge 6-inch branch is going to fall down from a lightning strike or something. Eventually trees drop their branches, and a tree in the wrong position on your property can be a very big expense. However, if you have if you find a property that is the trees are far from the housing and structures, and no problem, they look beautiful, and if they drop a branch, no problem. But look at the property and see what kind of maintenance it may take, because there are areas where you just have to do a lot of maintenance. And one of them is, for example, if someone has a really fancy, beautiful, expensive gardening with multiple structures, it's beautiful. Some people love those really ornate bushes and everything, all different kinds of varieties. Well, they keep growing, and it's hard to maintain them. And they may just you can have a bush that just grows up next to a house, and it might be a beautiful lilac, but next thing you know, it's 20 feet tall and it's blocking your windows, and you got to cut it down. And there's all kinds of problems with certain kinds of landscaping trees if they're too close to the house, and bushes. And so you just want to make sure that your yard is reasonable maintenance. I mean, some people don't want to mow anything. They'll say, okay, give me a Saturday afternoon and 30 minutes, I'll mow my little yard, and that's it. That's all I'm doing. But if you got a property that you might have to maintain several acres, you got to think about the kind of machinery that you're going to need to maintain that kind of property. Like, you're going to need a large scale lawnmower with a 4-foot bed or something like that. In some cases, in some properties, you might even need a tractor on your property with some way to lift things out of the way, like rocks and tree stumps and so on. So think about what's involved in your yard when you buy a property. Is it going to cost you a fortune just to keep it maintained, or is it relatively easily maintained? So I hope I summarized everything here. We got a lot of different factors that come into play when you want a low maintenance property, and just think a little bit about all the different options, because it's really hard to find every single thing on your property that matches total low maintenance. There might be something, maybe the HVAC system, or maybe you got to deal with the trees or something like that. But try to find as low maintenance property as you can possibly get, because over the long haul you're going to be rewarded, because basically a penny saved is a penny earned. And if you don't have to spend the money on all kinds of maintenance on your property, then it's going to be money in your back pocket. So thanks again for listening. I hope you see some of my other videos. I watch a lot of other people's content, and I enjoy the comments very much. Thanks again.